I've definitely heard a sentiment on many of our teams and from our player base as well, kind of the feeling of, oh, good, like a game I can actually finish. But I think that also really puts the onus on us as developers to make sure that the content we're making, the gameplay we're making, really is going to be worth the time players are putting into it.
We're just on the eve of the launch, pretty much, and then we'll be seeing some reviews soon. How's everybody feeling at the studio?
We're very excited. It's always a delight after you've worked on something for this many years to finally get to see it in players' hands. We're feeling really good about the buzz and the excitement that people are feeling. And one of the best things has been that as a team, we've been playing the game a lot over the past several weeks. And so it's been a delight for all of us to discover and watch each other discover, little secrets and levels we didn't know were there, get really invested in these builds and playthroughs, and just have fun in the same way that we want our players to have fun with this game.
There was something that struck me from earlier interviews I've been reading that I wanted to just pick your brains about, and I think it was Matt Hansen, who's the art director, said something quite interesting about Avowed being an RPG that respects players' time, and of course, RPGs you tend to think of as being sort of massive 60, 100-hour epics, and the suggestion there was that Avowed, if you want to, you can tackle reasonably quickly. I just wondered if you could talk me through what the thinking was behind that.
When we're building games, we want all of our content to be placed very intentionally. We're not trying to bloat with stuff just to keep players busy because we know everybody has plenty of options, plenty of things to do with their time. So we want everything that they find in our games to feel worth their time, to feel interesting, to pique their interest, and to drive their curiosity about the game world we're giving them. So scope-wise, players can expect something that's roughly on par with the Outer Worlds in Avowed. But the really neat thing about RPGs is you can really opt into the kind of experience you want based on the difficulty level you set, based on how much or how little you engage with conversations, with exploration, with combat. You can have a much longer, deeper, more expansive experience, or you can have a slightly quicker one. And the game, the story you discover in the world will really adapt based on what you personally find and what you personally do with those discoveries.
For a sort of long time RPG development studio, if you're taking that approach, is that quite hard to sort of manage both camps of players, the people that might want that quicker playthrough, and then the kind of people that really like to get into every nook and cranny and really, get the most out of the game?
I think it's an experience that we're used to optimizing for because RPGs have been our bread and butter for so many years. We always want to make sure that the critical path, that's the main story through the game, feels clear, gives them a strong sense of purpose, kind of speaks to their existential motivations as a character in the world, and that all of the side content that they can discover around that really informs that story, builds out the world in interesting ways, gives them interesting ways to role play their character, and gives them neat mechanical rewards too, like unique weapons, armor, other pieces of gear, things that'll really make them feel more powerful in the world and give them more options for how they want to play. So, we always have to understand kind of what's the basic experience going to be of someone who's only doing that main story. Are they going to know exactly what they need to know about the world and what's driving them forward? Are we making sure that they're going to get maybe just enough experience to continue forward? But then, making sure that players who dip into those other parts of the world, who really want to clear all of the map, that they're finding things that are new and novel and not rehashes of content that we've already placed elsewhere.
Is that kind of approach something you found you've had to do more during your time as Obsidian? Because I think there's a sense, isn't there, that a lot of gamers who might have been playing games for many years, they're getting a bit older, they've got more commitments, and just balancing games around your own life can sometimes be quite difficult. And is that something that you have found yourselves taking into account more, sort of as the longer you've been with Obsidian?
Yeah, I've definitely heard a sentiment, on many of our teams and from our player base as well. I kind of the feeling of, oh, good, like a game I can actually finish, a game I can get all the way through. You're right. Like one of the neat things about gaming expanding as a market, and I think so many more people coming to games, so many people who grew up with games, still playing them, is that there's such a broad range of interests, but I think that also really puts the onus on us as developers to make sure that the content we're making, the gameplay we're making, really is going to be worth the time players are putting into it. Again, I don't think most people are looking for something just to, kill a few hours. Like we all have options, and so players want things that are going to reward their curiosity, that are going to show them something that feels new and novel, and that are going to give them a really immersive, valuable experience.
And another thing I think we're hearing more about, you've got that group of players that are maybe that bit older and maybe they now have families or demanding jobs. And then at the other end of the scale, we hear a lot that another challenge, particularly if you're trying to grow an audience, is maybe you have younger players that are sort of fairly stuck to a particular live service title, for example. Is that another consideration when you have offering people this kind of mixed approach of how they can play the game in terms of the length of time they spend with it?
Over the years, I've heard, various concerns and hand-wringing at different times about, oh, are single player games done? Does everybody, just want to play these, live service games? Does everyone just want to play multiplayer now? But I think there always has been, and I think there always will be a market for single player games, for games that give you, a really cohesive, singular experience, and then allow you to move on to the next one.
There's a stat that often gets trotted out in these conversations about how something like only 10% of people ever finish games. And I mean, as someone who plays games, I find that depressing. Like, how does that feel when you read that as someone on your end of the equation?
I remember it was both surprising and kind of not when I first came across that. It's kind of liberating in a way once you embrace that fact, though, because again, especially in an RPG where you are building so much content that is opt-in and so much content that is designed to be discovered by people who are looking for it and missed by those who are not, it really lets you lean into building the content for the people who are going to find it. So something like companion conversations. These are, moments where you're having kind of those deep, long kind of character arc building conversations with the main characters who are going to follow your player character throughout the course of the game. We're writing those for the people who are going to have them and for the people who enjoy them, because most of them are ultimately optional. So, whenever you're writing, a quest or a conversation or putting together a combat, there's always this little voice in the back of your head that says, but what about for the players who are going to skip this? And so you always want to make sure that you have those exit ramps for people who are, less interested in getting, into the weeds of the lore, less interested in finding every mini boss, in the map. But what that means is you're saying, okay, great. Here is, an optional combat with a really tough mini boss. Here is, a really deep but really, character rich conversation with this companion that the player's going to be spending their time with. I can invest in this combat for the people who want it and this conversation for the people who really want to have it, because I know that the people who don't, whether that's 90%, 50%, whatever, they're just going to stay away from it. But I can make sure that the people who are going to look for it, who are going to engage with it, are going to have the best possible time with it.
And I suppose whenever you put any kind of creative work out into the world, you just got to accept that everyone's gonna, yeah, do their thing with it. And yeah, you've only got
And
so much.
especially with games, for sure.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's many different approaches people take, certainly. And just looping back to, yeah, you were talking about this idea that single player games, I mean, it feels like every few years people pronounce the death of single player games, but then hearing you talk about the kind of process behind Obsidian Games Avowed there, and it sounds like it's a studio with a real strong culture of this kind of world building, and it's very much rooted in single player games. And it sounds like you've really stuck to your guns with Avowed in terms of keeping that focus on um, providing a single player experience. And was that something you were quite insistent on as a studio? Because I think that you get the sense that there's sometimes a pull to follow trends or things like that.
I mean, and there's been some talk about this already. We've, discussed this in the past. Very, very early in Avowed's development and pre-production, there were efforts to make it multiplayer. But what we realized relatively quickly was that kind of the features and experiences that we needed to build for multiplayer were in competition with the features and experiences that make our single player games compelling. And so things like, how do you have a multiplayer experience with character dialogue? Do you have one player driving and everybody else is spectating, which is, kind of the opposite experience of what we're trying to get when we put together these branching dialogue trees? How do we handle having multiple players in the world at once, moving certain quest states forward and changing the world around it. And, I realize that these are challenges that larger multiplayer games that have been around for a very long time have solved, but they are very real challenges, both technically and creatively. And so for us, we feel that our strengths really lie in creating that strong, immersive world, a really compelling single player experience, a really tight narrative that gives the player a meaty role in the world and characters who get to know, and to explore the conflicts and the challenges that they're coming across in the world. And all of that is something that we can convey much more clearly and specifically in a single player game.
Yeah, and is feeling, I guess the fact that we've ended up with Avowed where it is probably answers this, but is the feeling that it would have been a mistake to go down the multiplayer path? I think there's been a few cases recently where studios have sort of moved out of their area of expertise, perhaps particularly single player studios, and then it's maybe not quite gone as well as it could have done. Do you feel like it would have been a mistake for Obsidian to pursue a multiplayer path, or?
So, every making every game is about trade-offs and deciding where you're going to invest your time, which creative and technical problems you're going to solve, and which you're going to say maybe another day. As a studio, we have made Grounded, which is multiplayer. And studios like Larian have made fantastic RPGs that have very strong single-player experiences, as well as multiplayer components. I think that for Avowed, single player was the right choice. I think it allowed us to lean into our strengths, and it allowed us to focus our creative and technical problem solving on creating a really strong world, a very nuanced narrative, some really great companion characters, and also building a really beautiful and technically performant world that I think is going to really stand out for players in a few days.
Being under Microsoft, did that kind of help with that goal of sticking to the single player path? Did that give you a bit of security there?
I think being part of Microsoft has just given us more security in making our games generally. They've been a wonderful partner to us. They've been very supportive of all the games we've made, from, Avowed coming out in a few days, Outer Worlds 2 coming out later this year, to even smaller games like Pentiment, that have a very specific vision and a very specific audience. So, having that support, having them, understand and really champion our vision for these games has been wonderful. And we've also gotten some great technical support as well. They have groups like the Advanced Technology Group and support at the Coalition, which has really helped us optimize our levels, basically get the whole game running as smoothly as it possibly can. And they have a wonderful user research department that also gave us some fantastic testing of our first few hours of the game that let us iteratively improve that experience so that every tutorialization was clear for the player. The player could understand the world they were in a little bit faster and a little bit better, and just understand how to play the game in a pretty seamless and natural way.
Sticking with Microsoft, you're going to hate me. There's the question that is often asked about Avowed, of whether we'll see it on other consoles soon. I kind of feel like you're probably not going to answer that, and Phil Spencer's made his views on that pretty clear. But just looking to the future for Obsidian, I wondered, do you envisage a kind of multi-format future, and do you feel as if the days of platform exclusivity might be sort of coming to an end, as the narrative seems to be?
So I don't really have a whole lot of insight into the long-term business decisions there. Outer Worlds 2 is going to be a multi-platform game. Personally, as a developer and a gamer, I'm just excited for however we can get our games into more players' hands.
Well met, that one. Not the first time you've been asked it, though, I'm sure. And just as well, obviously there was a lot of attention on Microsoft last year, and various things going on with mergers and studios and things like that. And are Obsidian feeling pretty optimistic about the future and the Microsoft as things stand?
I mean, we're releasing 2 games this year. We're feeling fantastic. Yeah, we've as a studio, I think we've gotten a very good rhythm and practice around having multiple projects in flight at once. We find it to be both pretty creatively fulfilling, and it also ensures that we've always got something to move our teams onto, always got something new we're working on. We've always got something that one team can learn from another on. So yeah, we're feeling good about the future.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And not got too long left. Just on, how are you feeling about releasing the game in February? Because it's a busy old month, isn't
I don't know that there are that many months anymore that aren't busy. It feels like there's
it?
something big coming out every month of the year these days. But I'm really excited by the way I've seen people responding to Avowed already. It's been extremely heartening to see that every time we've done some kind of early hands-on preview or playthrough, the people who have played the game come away loving it and saying they want to play more. So I feel really great about players getting players getting their hands on the game themselves soon. And yeah, I think we're going to stand out.
Cool. And final question, really, on that point, I guess. And is there a particular element or just anything that you're looking forward to the public getting their hands on and experiencing with Avowed?
One of the most interesting things about Avowed, in my opinion, is how explorable the world is. There are a lot of little secrets and hidden moments in the world, in conversation trees. There's so much about the world that you can discover if you follow your curiosity and kind of poke around in the nooks and crannies we've left. And so many things that the team has done a wonderful job of creating as these sort of little visual set pieces that tell a story all of their own. So, one of my favorite things is to see players start to discover these things for themselves when they play through the game, to see what sorts of theories they formulate, to see just that sense of reward and delight at having found something that you kind of discovered was there, and then wondering how big the rest of the world is and what else there is for you to find.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, yeah, look forward to checking it out a bit more, as many other people are, I'm sure. That was great. That was everything from me, Carrie. I don't know if there's anything you thought we missed or if you wanted to add anything quickly at the end there.
I'm excited to see what kinds of envoys players build, what kinds of story choices they make on February 18th.
Awesome. Well, we'll be looking out for Avowed then. Great stuff. Thanks ever so much for your time. It's been really interesting speaking to you. And yeah, best of luck with the launch. Hope it all goes well.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.